So there were a couple of big studies like that in the last couple of years that showed it doesn't play into your odds of having a live birth, which is ultimately what matters. Okay, so it may impact the amount of eggs you get with fertility treatment. So we'll get into that in a moment, but it doesn't affect the quality of your eggs. And that's critically important for people to understand. And they're often not being told that by various sources that they might be dealing with.
Yoga Mara welcomes you to the Love Your Limits podcast. We are two sisters from the west of Ireland with a passion for helping people connect back to themselves and feel less alone on their journey. Both of us have contrasting personalities, career background, and life experience, yet each of us found physical, emotional, and mental healing from learning to live more intuitively and with integrity.
We will be sharing our own personal journeys alongside interviewing a wide range of health and wellness experts that will empower you to shed fear, self-doubt, and move into a place of self-love and confidence. It is time to put yourself first, create healthy boundaries, and learn to love your limits.
Hello and welcome to the Love Your Limits podcast. And on today's episode, we're talking with Jessica Bourke, the Fertility Detective, on all things fertility health. With almost 20 years of clinical experience dealing with fertility issues and pregnancy loss, Jessica has gained a reputation for helping people to succeed where everything else has failed. Jessica is a TEDx speaker, co-author of the Guilt Free Gourmet, and regularly appears in Irish media. She has featured as the Ask the Expert on herfamily.ie and rollercoaster.ie and is the creator of the groundbreaking Making Sense of Miscarriage programme, which offers details of evidence-based support for those who have suffered pregnancy loss, as well as the Fertility Reset 2.0, a self-paced course that covers the key information needed to optimise your fertility potential. As your fertility detective, Jessica's goal is helping her clients to get pregnant and stay pregnant. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much, guys. You're so kind.
So happy to have you here, and thank you so much for making the time to talk to us
Not
today.
at all. Delighted to. Delighted.
Jessica, we go, well, I wouldn't say way back, but we have met you before, but it was virtually.
Yes.
And now we have the pleasure of meeting you in person. It's so nice. So we're speaking to you on an Instagram live, I think it was last year. Mm-hmm. And we spoke about, I actually shared my egg freezing journey. Mm-hmm. And I remember one thing that struck me about sharing that story was the amount of women that came to me afterwards. It was overwhelming about how many had just really craved this conversation to open it up. And the reason I shared it, both Hannah and myself wanted to demystify the process. Yeah. But could you tell us, just before we get into all of that, could you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you help people on their fertility journeys?
Sure, no problem. And you're absolutely right, because egg freezing is such an important topic, so we'll get into that. So I started a rather kind of circuitous route into all of this because my primary degree was law, but I became very ill during the first year and had to repeat. And as you do at that age, you're thinking, this is the end of my life. Everything's over. Having a year essentially lying on the couch. And it was during that time, that was definitely my catalyst, my shift in life, because I was very close to doing medicine. That's what I wanted to move to as kind of a postgrad. But then realized during that time frame that any of the doctors I spoke to, none of them could help me. And that just really unnerved me, because I thought, okay, so I've been brought up with, law, medicine, architecture, accounting, that kind of standard approach. But they weren't able to offer me anything in terms of my recovery. It was a case of go home, just convalesce and you'll get better, because it was viral. And then slowly but surely, I started through my own research. And bear in mind, this is the 90s, guys. So there wasn't the internet. So I was still having to get books and stuff online and just do my own research. And through that, discovered nutrition. That was probably the start for me. I'd always been into fitness, but never realized the impact that diet would have. Then followed on from there to get acupuncture treatment, and suddenly realized, even though I couldn't explain it, that I was feeling better, that I had more energy. And I was recovering quicker than they anticipated. So then went on, continued with my legal studies, but realized that this was not for me. And actually started studying acupuncture alongside, which is a bit weird. Then went on to do postgraduate study in a hospital in China. Realized I really wanted to specialize in fertility while I was there. and then came back and did nutrition, clinical medicine, more studies in fertility. And it just went from there. At the very start, though, I actually turned away fertility clients. I'd only take on pregnant ones because I felt it was less pressure. But, you know, when something is your calling, you can't avoid it for very long. So very soon, I just fell into that. And in terms of how it operates, it's all about getting to the root cause.
Yeah.
Why is a person not able to get pregnant or stay pregnant? And that is very individualized. It's very nuanced. It's involving usually quite a bit of testing, but very targeted testing. Otherwise, you could waste a fortune and not really get anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something like I'd love to know more about is why is there such a rise in, you know, people experiencing these challenges with getting pregnant? You know, do you know what the reason is, or is it
it's a combination?
an array of
it's
things?
a combination of factors. Number one, for sure, yes, things are being more reported now. You know, I've had conversations like with my grandmother before talking about, you know, sort of her day. And she would tell me, oh, yeah, there was always, you know, so-and-so down the road and they'd been married a while and hadn't had kids. You know, bear in mind, this would be like the 50s.
Yeah.
And so definitely there's an element of we have the internet now. People are able to go onto these anonymous forums, which I have to say is very helpful for people. It can be negative too, but very helpful for people to not feel so alone. So there's that side. But then there's the very hardcore scientific side of it, which is looking at the drop in sperm counts, the huge increase in numbers seeking fertility support, bearing in mind, obviously, fertility treatment is only about 45 years old, so it's not that long. And you can just see that it's coming from environment in terms of toxin exposure, stress, huge changes in diet and lifestyle in a way that we just haven't evolved to catch up with yet because our bodies haven't changed as much as our lives have, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's so true as well. And it's the modern living and it's all the stressors as well. And we spoke about this recently that you can't avoid stress, but you can try and learn the tools to really help you deal with it in a much healthier way, in a better way for your body. If we were to look at the starting points, so before people are, or maybe someone is just considering about getting pregnant or trying to conceive, where do we start with that? Where do we start with our own journey? Because I know before I went to investigate egg retrieval, I didn't know half of what I should have known about my own body, which is actually sad. And I was in my 30s and I was like, how do I not know that about my own menstrual health and AMH levels and all of those different areas and the ovulation cycle and what you can test for that and all of that. So where should people start? Is it really around their own menstrual health as well at the beginning and then looking more through the ovulation tracking, all of that stuff? Because it can be a bit overwhelming, I suppose, when you start to open the door. It can be
massively overwhelming. And I think you touched on some great points there. The fact that we're just not properly educated about this. Now, I'm obviously in my 40s now, so different generation, but I've asked my daughter about this because she's a teenager and saying, well, what are they teaching in the schools? And she's like, well, you are kind of taught about your cycle, but Mum, I did still have to stick up my hand and say, well, actually, no, periods don't have to be painful because my mum says so.
Amazing.
So I love that because there is still there's a very, I guess, archaic approach to anything reproductive health. It's very much obviously focused on the person with eggs still. It's like it's all about the woman. It's not about anything else. And that really sticks with people, as I'm sure you encountered yourselves when you're thinking about egg freezing. It's like, oh, it's all about me. It's all on my shoulders. But it takes two to tango. You know, whether going the donor route with sperm or not, you need to have both.
Yeah.
And that's something that's frequently overlooked. But if you're talking about the starting points, you just reminded me there when you were asking the question of a couple I met in the hospital in China all those years ago. And they were only, I think they're in their late 20s. Only looked about 21, ever looked so young over there. And I said, so why are you here? And they said, well, we'd like to have children. And I said, oh, you're struggling? And they said, no, we would like to have them in approximately 2.5 years. They're not precise. And we would like to be prepared. That is the absolute antithesis of what you see happening over here. Unfortunately, we have a very much, instead of a front-loaded approach, in other words, facing things head on before they become a problem, we do the opposite. We wait until things are a problem. And I understand that a lot of that is fear-born, understandably. It's kind of a case of, well, out of sight, out of mind. If I just ignore the fact that my period's been a bit crazy for the past couple of months, hopefully it'll just correct itself. And there is, you know, to anyone out there who is scared of seeking help and, you know, doing investigations, I promise you, you will feel better. The analogy I would use, I said it to a client the other day, is that a spider that you can see is a lot better than one that you can't.
That is so true.
So although my client said, yeah, but I've got lots of spiders in the room. I'm like, don't worry, we're going to deal with one at a time. It'll be okay. Because she had lots of issues going on. So I would say from a starting point, do pay attention to your overall health. Do pay attention to your diet and lifestyle. So if you're very much in the kind of going out phase of your life, and that's cool, enjoy it. But if you're noticing that things are maybe a bit off, if you're noticing that actually my energy is a bit flat, and people often don't think that any of this is anything to do with fertility, but it does. If you notice that your bowel habits, if you're not actually going to the bathroom as frequently, that matters because it impacts how you're actually processing and excreting estrogen, which plays into a whole host of other things. So I think the starting point, people often assume it's just from know that I have a regular period and that I'm ovulating. But it's actually just as important, all the other foundational stuff. Am I sleeping well? Am I dealing with anxiety or mental health issues that might become more pronounced when I go to try to conceive? We have to look at the full picture rather than it just being so kind of two-dimensional. So definitely I would say take stock of everything. View the phase of your life that you'd be going into with trying to conceive as the me time, the selfish in the best possible way time of your life. Because too often it becomes like a secondary agenda, like this sideline project, because you're, busy with career or life. I mean, a lot of the people I'd be dealing with, the demographic, are usually from, early 30s into early to mid 40s. They've so much going on. They might have sick family members, or they're moving house, or they're renovating home, whatever it is that they're doing, they will have so much going on that fertility stuff just becomes secondary. And we have to, this is going back to what I was saying at the beginning about how we've evolved and our bodies haven't actually changed that much. We think that we can just go, but ask anyone who takes that time over Christmas or on a holiday, the way you say to yourself, yeah, I'm fine the first couple of days. Then by the end of, let's say, 2-week holiday, you go, oh.
Now I'm fine.
Now I'm relaxed.
This is what it feels like.
I didn't know what this feeling was. So, and many people I'd speak to after, Christmas or any holiday break, they would say that they get sick. They often, when they let go, they get ill, and there's a reason for that. It's because you're just pushing too hard.
That's
and it is.
important.
It's a weird age as well. I feel like being in your 30s because, like you said, there could be so many outside things going on outside of fertility, but it's also the first time in your life where your peers are all moving at different paces to you. So some may be getting married, some may still be single, some may be having babies constantly and it's easier for them. Some are struggling, some are getting pregnant but maybe struggling with a miscarriage. So there's so many different kind of elements that come into this age group in particular, which is really tough and trying to navigate that. Do you find with the clients that you work with that they're coming to you, obviously it's a physical health issue, but it's also a very emotional one. And do you find that that's the type of the support that you can offer with the emotional side of it?
Yes. I mean, I would never claim to be, I don't have training in counselling, but over the years, of course, that has played a big role because of the impact that I see it have on relationships in many ways, weirdly. So it's not just, people might assume, it's just the relationship with a couple. But even if it's an individual on the solo journey, they're dealing with lots as well, with family members who all have an opinion on what they're doing, or the work relationships that someone might be dealing with, or a boss who isn't being understanding of needing to go for scans or whatever might need to be happening. So certainly it's a very combined effort. You're looking at the mental and emotional side, while of course delving into the physical, and I suppose the biochemistry side is really what I'd be looking at. Because very often I think it's just overly simplified. People don't realize the level of control they actually have. And when they start, talking about their particular case and understanding their body better, you can suddenly see the light turning on as they realize, oh yes, I can actually do something about this. And then when you see it borne out in black and white in the test results,
amazing.
Then they're sold.
Well, that's so empowering.
Exactly. And I think it's so important. And that's why the whole reason we wanted to share our stories and our journeys and have you on today is to kind of create this awareness, because so many people don't know. And I'm talking about in their mid to late 30s going in and finding out what is an AMH? Like, what is an AMH level? What is that test? I didn't know it going in to freeze my eggs at 35. And, while I was single going through that process, I did, it was a really good experience because I felt like, oh my gosh, I have the control now. I can control this part of my life because it was during COVID and I felt this weight lifted off my shoulders. But at the same time, it was still a very emotional journey because I was doing it alone and I had never envisaged that for myself at that age. And I think, and there's so many women out there that are in the same boat. And I suppose, again, could you just share a bit of light, shed a bit of light on AMH levels and what they are? And again, this scaremongering, friends of mine have gone and done it and people I know and, just the things that they be told in those consultations, just really instilling that fear into people that, you know what, you might actually need to go twice before it's even done once. So could you kind of elaborate a bit on that and tell us more about AMH
Absolutely.
levels?
This is a topic I discuss a lot and I've looked very deep into the research on it as well. When I was, going back, it's probably about a decade when I saw AMH, which stands for anti-Müllerian hormone testing, kind of being used more frequently coming onto the market. And at that point, I kind of gave it the benefit of the doubt. I thought, okay, cool. If this can tell people their egg reserve, as it were, sold as at the time. Although I have to say at that point as well, there was very much the focus on your egg quality as well. That's what people were being told.
Okay.
And so very quickly, though, the cracks started to show. Very quickly. I realized that this test is not the be-all and end-all of your fertility. And in fact, this has been proven in recent meta-analysis. So that's a study that would group all of the results of a number of studies. So there were a couple of big studies like that in the last couple of years that showed it doesn't play into your odds of having a live birth, which is ultimately what matters, okay? So it may impact the amount of eggs you get with fertility treatment, so we'll get into that in a moment, but it doesn't affect the quality of your eggs. And that's critically important for people to understand. And they're often not being told that by various sources that they might be dealing with. So the anti-Müllerian hormone, it's basically affecting the antral follicles. So the antral follicles at the front of the ovaries are secreting the AMH. And so what they found was, well, if we measure this in the bloodstream, well, this should give a gauge of how many follicles are remaining active within the ovaries. Now, unfortunately, the figures that we use, like PMOL, it confuses people because they think, gosh, do I only have 5 eggs left because I had an AMH of 5? No, that's not the case. You're still in the tens of thousands. So it's important to understand that. But when someone has what's deemed a lower level, so if we're talking about in Ireland and the UK, anything that's, again, dependent on your age bracket. So if you're under 35 and you have an AMH maybe less than 10 to 15, they might flag it. And certainly if it's less than 5, again, they bring it up with you. And of course, it's possible that a person of a younger age, kind of what's known as premature ovarian insufficiency, so they maybe don't have as an active ovarian function, so they've lower AMH. But equally, on the other side of the scale, you can have it be overactive. In other words, you can have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And in those cases, they'll often come back with very high AMH. So an AMH sort of above 35, 40. I had a woman before who was told that she was 40 years old and came skipping into me saying, wonderful, my GP says it's great because my AMH is 60. And I said, take a seat. This isn't wonderful. We need to do further testing to rule out PCOS, which of course she had. So that's now actually being looked at as one of elevated AMH is now being considered a potential other marker to look at for PCOS. So with AMH levels, what happens is people are often offered it for free by a fertility clinic, take note, so that they will get the test done. And then if it's low, they'll receive the phone call saying, come on in, time to freeze your eggs, time to start fertility treatment if you have a partner. And it can really scare people. And it is a very irresponsible, and I would argue medically negligent approach to take. Because if you were only basing that decision based off of AMH, not looking at any other hormones, right? FSH, LH, estradiol, prolactin, thyroid panel, you name it. If you aren't having transvaginal ultrasound scans so you can see the ovaries and how active they are and actually visually see how many eggs are being produced and the lining thickness and everything else that matters, you are not getting a full picture. So you were just being sold based on sort of one tiny piece of information, not to mention the fact, and this is also critical for people to know, the AMH level can be variable depending on which point of your cycle it's taken, even though you're told that, the only way it can go is down. It only ever gets worse. So it's variable. And secondly, it can go up, and it can go up quite significantly because it's impacted by things like abdominal surgery, nutrient deficiencies can impact it. So if you correct those things, the AMH can go up again.
Wow.
How
Wow.
interesting. So,
And what about for things like ovarian cysts and things that
Mm-hmm.
I know are very common among women?
yes.
And can that affect your AMH levels, or, affect maybe trying to conceive?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Usually, now this has to be evaluated with a good gynecologist.
Okay.
Generally speaking, and again, it depends on the type of ovarian cyst. So if you're talking like an endometrioma, which might be indicative of endometriosis, they'll probably need to be evaluated with a laparoscopy. And then the gynae will make a call on, do we want to remove this? Because for any surgeon in that position, they're walking a tightrope. On the one hand, they don't want to remove the cyst, but then damage the ovarian activity and reserve, because that's noted in the literature. It's temporary, but it can go as long as 6 to 12 months that ovary, or both ovaries, if there's a cyst on both sides, if it were removed, that it could impact them. On the other hand, if they feel that they can remove it safely, and that this, cyst, if it was an endometrioma, for example, is associated with endometriosis, which also needs to be addressed, well, then overall that should have a beneficial effect on someone.
Okay, interesting. Can we also touch on going solo? Doing this on your own. And I think this is something that may become more common in Ireland in the future. But just to kind of talk a bit about what your tips would be or advice would be to women that are, they've envisioned for themselves that they be settled with a partner and starting a family, and that hasn't worked out. But they've frozen their eggs and they're thinking about going and doing it on their own. Is this something you encounter a lot with clients? And if so, can you give us just a little bit of advice for the women out there that are thinking about doing this on their own?
Absolutely. I would have seen an explosion in that, obviously, during the recent pandemic. So many people just saying, well, great, now we've no chance of meeting someone, so let's get cracking. Let's do it ourselves. And I think
Two
it's
girls here
wonderful.
included in that.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's great. I think it's so wonderful to remember that we have options now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I was quoting earlier with talking about my grandmother, there were no options back then. There was no IVF. It was adoption or nothing, So it is great that now we have the option of egg freezing. We have the option of surrogacy. I've seen people do co-parenting. So I had a lovely couple I was working with over COVID who were in the UK. And she had a great friend. And she said, well, we'd always said if we got to a stage in our lives where we didn't meet someone, we were going to have kids together. And that's what they're doing.
Wow.
As friends.
As friends. They're
Wow.
co-parenting. That's the term
Yes,
used for it. So
yeah.
they will go create the embryos, everything, the whole 9 yards, and then they will co-parent, which I think is a very, modern and evolved way of
amazing,
doing
yeah.
things, because of course we know on the other hand, and this is really important for anyone who might level judgment at anyone who goes the fertility route, there are plenty of people out there who have children who aren't happy together, and whose children maybe as a result are not happy through the family dynamics. So I think it's just critical that everyone out there understands that as things evolve, in the same way that we have 3D printing of body parts and you can get a bionic titanium hip, okay, the same is going to happen with fertility, and that's cool, but for some reason, because it's such a personal, intimate topic, it attracts a lot of judgment. So the first thing I'd say to anyone who's on that egg freezing journey is to just not give a hoot what anybody else thinks. Truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's, I just feel like there's a lot of, maybe it's just in Ireland, but I feel like there's a lot of shame around it. Massive for women. And I just feel like they just feel this deep sense of shame that they haven't reached a point that they thought they would be at this stage of their lives, almost like a failure, or that it's the end of a chapter. And it's horrible to have, because as women, we have that biological clock. But to take that pressure off ourselves, that, look, at if we go and do this alone and we get a donor, who knows who you'd meet down the line. It's not ruling that out as well, but it's also to be realistic too about how tough and challenging it will be, but also to have those plans in place about the support you're going to need around you, the people that will need to help out.
You absolutely need that. You need that support, and you'll very quickly find out who your friends are, or indeed the family members that you maybe need to distance yourselves from. That's really key. And the other thing I'd say is, because I was talking to a client about this last week, she's in exactly that position, and she's 37, and she said it was only through her family member going through IVF, her brother, that she realised, oh, I can do this too. I don't have to sit here sadly waiting for someone when I can actually proceed with freezing my eggs. So that's what she's doing. And I think that is anyone's choice who wants to do that. However, and worth noting at the moment, unfortunately, the government funding doesn't account for this. So the very people, as I was discussing this with her, single salary, the very people who require that support aren't yet getting it. I really hope that is something that will change, as it really needs to change. But the critical things to focus on are your prep work. So for anyone who's going to freeze their eggs, do take a few months, if you can, beforehand. Treat it in the same way you would if you're deciding to run the marathon or something.
Yeah.
You train, you wouldn't just rock up on the start line and hope for the best. It's the same with the eggs. So all the things I was referring to earlier, treat yourself in that same manner like you're preparing for a marathon. What would you do? You'd get a lot of sleep. You'd make sure you were eating properly. You wouldn't be going wild at the weekends. You'd rein it in. Definitely, I would curb alcohol intake for sure, because the eggs go through a minimum 90-day, closer to 120-day developmental window from sort of the, primordial follicles through the whole way to actually full development before they be released for ovulation or retrieval. So during that time frame, you can actually influence them. You can affect what's going on in the follicular fluid around the eggs that goes back to proteins, hormones, nutrient levels. So there's a lot more involvement in it than I think people realize. They assume that my eggs are there and that's that. So I have all the eggs I'm ever going to have, which is true. But they think that they can't really make a difference to them other than what their age is on a piece of paper. And we know now from epigenetic science, which is the study of how environment affects our genes and switches things on and off, that you've huge, enormous potential to influence things. Because that's the difference between your chronological age, so your age on a piece of paper, versus your biological age. Okay. So that means I could deal with someone who's 35 and thinks that they're grand, but they've a lot going on in the background with their health and things aren't looking so hot. Versus I might deal with a woman who's 40, but actually when I go through everything, I'm like, you're looking good. Like everything hormonally, what we can see in the test results is looking good. So I don't want anyone writing themselves off.
Yeah.
However, very important to note, when freezing eggs as opposed to embryos,
yes,
it is important to state that, yes, you do want to freeze eggs at a younger age. And that's simply because an embryo is more robust. So if freezing eggs with either a partner sperm or donor sperm, and you then have resulting embryos, usually ideally on day 5 or 6, as they're more complex in their development at that stage, that's much more reliable in terms of your future fertility potential. So the word I'd use is, if you're freezing eggs, it's a little bit more of a lottery. Versus if freezing embryos, then it's a bit more of an insurance policy, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
So just that people understand what they're getting themselves into. And at the moment, we also know that probably about half the people who freeze their eggs don't end up using them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they have them there, that's great, but they don't necessarily end up jumping
End up even needing them, yeah. And I think even that, and Rachel, I remember it when you went through it, it was like a weight was taken off your shoulders, because like you said, this biological clock that's constantly hanging over us, and it's just this constant pressure. And sometimes there's people that don't even want kids but feel so pressured about it, and that they're so afraid that, oh my God, if I wake up and I'm 40 and I haven't, so I better freeze my eggs. And we can get caught up in that hype as well. And it's just really spotlighting that there are options, and it may not be an option that you want to consider, but it just knowing what's there and just taking ownership of your own health and understanding your body and where you're at, and understanding the AM health and knowing that's not the be all and end all of your overall fertility. That was such an important point to make, because that is something I know that even at the time when I was getting checked, I was like, I just know AMH is this real important thing. And
it's such a numbers game.
Yes.
It's like AMH levels, that's the number. How many eggs did you get? That's the number. What age were you when you got it? That's the number. It's all numbers. And it gets very competitive, and it gets, again, we're bringing the shame into it. This, I'm not good enough, and I find it's like, the blame is placed all on the woman. And that's something I want to touch on as well. When couples, in particular couples who are trying to conceive and maybe have experienced miscarriages, is it, just as important for the man, or is it important at all for the man to have a healthy diet and lifestyle as well as the woman when they're trying to conceive?
Thank you for asking this question, because it is so important. And I know anyone who follows me online is familiar, because I had a client last week saying, I know you're always banging on about this. Yes, it is critically important, critically. So much has been made of the egg, and I can understand why. In the very early stages, from about, day 0 at point of fertilization to day 3, those mitochondria, the energy powerhouse of the cell, of which they're in the sort of tens and hundreds of thousands, right, within an egg cell, they have to be functioning well. They're providing the sort of the energy source to push things forward with development. But from day 3 onwards, it's the sperm DNA that's kicking in. And there's some research I've also found that links it even going back to fertilization as well. So it is not just about the egg. And it is critical for people to know that beyond the very standard semen analysis, which just tells you how many there are, how well they're swimming, and the shape, so the count, motility, and morphology, you also need to go a step further and get the sperm DNA fragmentation test. Ideally, the alkaline comet test is the most sensitive. I mention that because there's lots of different assay methods and it can be confusing for people, but the comet test picks up on double DNA strand breaks as opposed to just single. And is this, because the next question is usually, does this mean I'm carrying through a genetic condition? No, that's a separate blood test, the karyotyping test. This is actually about damage that happens to the sperm after they're produced. So when they're waiting within the testes and the epididymis waiting to be used, that's when the damage occurs. And so there's, again, huge potential to improve it because the sperm, remember, are made afresh every single day. So when someone shows me a result, even if it is a sperm DNA frag result, but it's from a year ago, I might be saying, well, your sperm could be different from 3 months ago. Yeah. Remember? So if someone had a great result, but then let's say they were sick and had a bit of a fever or, had got COVID again, because I saw that going around recently. If that was happening or they'd suffered a kick to the groin playing football, it can absolutely then impact the next sample that results. So it's just really important for people to understand that if you're going through this as a couple with someone with sperm as well, you want to make sure that they are taking the same responsibility for their diet and lifestyle and health. Yeah. And also noting, really important to note this too, it is not just about diet and lifestyle. Okay. So there are many factors that would be outside of a person's control. Going back to this idea of shame or self-blame, you can't blame yourself for picking up an infection that affects the bladder or, the testes. You can't blame yourself for having had an anatomical issue since birth. How are you to control for undescended testes or anything like that? You can't. So it's just really important to note that this is not a blame or shame game at all. I will often see couples speak in that way to each other. I'll often hear the woman say, oh yeah, I know the problem's on my side. I'm like, no, we're not going to personalize this. In the same way that if you were sitting here talking to me and you had a gammy hip or, a kidney that needed to replace, nobody makes that emotional.
I know. Yeah.
But we make it emotional with reproduction. And that's going back to where we were taught and being told, oh, sure, so much as look at someone, you'll get pregnant. Yeah. We're made to think that it's just so natural, quote unquote, that it's just so instinctive. It's what we sort of have evolved to do. No. There's a whole load of people out there who are quite happily child-free. And then there are those who are child-free through no fault of their own. In other words, they've been trying their best, but it hasn't been happening. And I just think we need to allow for all groups of people without it being judged at all.
100%. It's so good to hear and so refreshing to hear. And I just wasn't really sure, so I wanted to get that clarification on it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Can you shed a bit of light on the programs that you offer? Because I find that fascinating because it's something that I know we spoke about previously, that you want to make this as less scary as possible for people.
Yes.
And as digestible and accessible. Thank you so much for doing that because it's such important work. But would you mind just expanding on the types of programs that you have available?
Sure.
And what's coming up as well for you?
Yeah. So interesting. My first program was the Making Sense of Miscarriage program. And that was born out of just the heartbreak I saw for people going through miscarriage and being told to just go try again. And it can be an incredibly complex topic, actually, with the many different areas to be looking at. Again, not just egg quality, but you're looking at autoimmunity, thrombophilia, so problems of blood clotting, anatomical issues, nutrient problems, hormone imbalance. There's loads to it. So of course, I love complexity. So I dove in the deep end. And that's kind of a more high level program with good support, with community group, etc. Then I released the Fertility Reset 2.0. That was actually off the back of back in, I think it was summer of 2021. I just ran like a 5-day challenge. And it had lots of info in it and people just went wild for it. It's just like, this is insane. So I said, okay, clearly people need this information. Yeah. So that program is probably designed more for people who've been trying for about a year and they're starting to get ticked off and they're thinking, really, do I need to go for IVF? But do I though? I'm not sure if I do. And have I crossed everything out and done all the testing that needs to be done? And that is really designed, I mean, there's expert interviews in it. There's a whole bonus module just about prepping for IVF. There's a lot of detailed PDF guides you can break down, understand testing, etc., and also resource guides so you can actually figure out, well, who should I go see? Because a core focus of what I do is being non-biased. So in spite of referring on to many different clients, I should say consultants or clinics, I would never take any benefit in kind, commission, nothing. I'm totally separate from the industry in that sense, because I think that's really important. I, number one, want to sleep at night. And number two, I think people need something. They need a source where they can go, okay, right, I can now take this information and make an informed decision.
Yes.
And then the newer program, because I wanted to have something that was very accessible for people, is the Fertility Fast Track. And that is really focused on, in partnership with Randox, on doing testing. So you can get your test results quickly, promptly, no wait times, like unfortunately there is for a lot of people with their GP, and then go through the program and actually be able to discern your next steps. Go, okay, there was this blood marker, there was a problem, what do I need to do? And I will then describe whether you need to be referred on elsewhere, whether there's a particular supplement you need to take, if it's a nutrient problem, what you might need to look at, if it's a hormone issue, so that people can actually start taking action.
Because that's the crucial thing about all of this is the time, and it's like time keeps ticking. And then if you have to wait for your next period, or, you're waiting for test results back and they're taking a couple of months before you can even start trying again. Or if it's IVF you're going through, time is of the essence. So I think this is an incredible program to offer. And I think so many people will be so relieved and grateful to have it.
Well, especially because I just from talking to other people as well, they're nearly half afraid to get it checked because, and I can understand it because I'm the same. If I'm any ailment or anything like that, the last thing I'm going to do is go to the doctor. I'll do everything else first I can do myself to help myself until I go and actually get seen to. And you can understand, but it is like you said, the time is crucial. But would you see that a lot with the clients that you have, that they're coming to you and hopefully not at the too late a stage, but that there's so much fear that they're bringing with that? It's like, I don't even want to know.
And
but
pressure.
Your whole approach is, no, but once we know, then we can resolve. So it's that kind of...
Yes, I do. And even just because I've learned a lot, obviously, from the messages I'd receive over Instagram, just DMs from people who aren't clients, just people reaching out, looking for support. I know the problems that are out there. And that's precisely why I've created this. Why did I even link up with the lab in the first place? Because I kept hearing from people, I can't get these bloods done with my GP. And there's a waiting list of like 3 months if I want to get into this particular fertility clinic. It's just not fair. It's not on. Now, of course, I'd love if it could all be free. I wish it could be with testing, etc. And it's great. It's a start with the government funding, but nonetheless, it's all so darn slow.
Yeah.
And for people to be able to just sign up, great, there's my discount, so I can get because you get a discount for getting the bloods done. Get them done at their local depot, wherever they need to go, within Ireland or within the UK as well. And then just immediately start being effective and taking action, improving the bloods. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but unfortunately, the system doesn't support that at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's it as well. It's the system letting everyone down other than them not letting themselves down, It can be so difficult.
Can you, just before we finish up here, because I think we'll definitely have to have you back on. There's so much that we want to talk about. I know, literally just getting warmed up. But do you do one-to-one consultations with people?
I do, yes.
And can you do them on Zoom as well if people aren't in Dublin? Okay, amazing.
That's how I work completely since 2021, since COVID. I went fully online. So, I mean, it's really interesting. I think I said this to you guys before. Just the Irish people are everywhere. I've had Zoom consults with people in Alaska, Botswana, Australia, loads of them in Dubai.
Wow.
So it's just something I think when they see or hear that familiar accent on Instagram, they're like, ooh, that sounds good. It's
so
appealing.
Nice, yeah.
So it is lovely and very helpful that, the people can just engage from wherever they are. But video is very important.
Yes,
I always say this because, in fact, I had a couple during the week and within the first 5 minutes, I could see she was starting to crack. So I started to pause and, let it out. Talk to me about your emotions because it's so critical because often they're not getting the opportunity to
And
do
I think
that.
that's something we need to note as well is that, we're sitting in front of you here and I can tell all the listeners now how your energy is just so relaxing, so engaging. I feel so comfortable in your presence. That is critical for something like this on such a sensitive topic.
Yeah.
So I feel like women would be very comfortable coming to you, couples as well, coming to you with their, struggles. And I can't think of anyone better to help them, put them at ease. So Jessica, thank you so much for being on with us today. And like I said, we will definitely be having you back.
Absolute pleasure.
You're such a wealth of knowledge. And I know that the information you're giving people is going to be so empowering. And we'll definitely put all of your details on the show notes at the end of the podcast. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so
amazing.
much, Rachel Hannah. I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Love Your Limits podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If something resonated with you or you would like to learn more, please find all contact details in the show notes. We are also delighted to offer our listeners 1 month free access to Yogamara on demand. Use the code LOVEYOURLIMITS at sign up to watchyogamara.com. And remember, learning to love your limits is an act of self-care and self-love.